My name is Michael Kuzatz. Today we've got Brandon Boyer and Angie Coleman with us to talk about painting aircraft. And one of the, you see a picture of Brandon there, and we realize that is a picture of Brandon 19 years ago, correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. One of the things you need to know, if you come to Duncan Aviation looking for Brandon, he doesn't look like that. So if you see Angie there, you can see where her hair is on her shoulders. That's Brandon's beard is about the same place on Angie's shoulders. So he was trying, they tried to recruit him to sing for ZZ Top, and he turned them down. So we've got Angie Coleman. Been with Duncan, you just hit 20 years, right?
Yep, 20, actually going on 21.
Well, you're always going on 21. I mean,
no. Years at Duncan, almost 21.
And you started at 17 years old.
17 years old in the accessory shop, working in the technical library. Basically, really born and raised at Duncan. Learned about airplanes through manuals.
Good God.
Mm-hmm.
So you're probably pretty sharp at microfiche, and
Yes.
You'll be like the last generation that even knows what that word
Yeah, it's funny if you bring up microfiche to people, they kind of just give you this weird look these days, but yes.
Very cool. And my name is Michael Kuzatz, and I'm the Eastern Regional Avionics Sales Manager, and you probably are wondering why I'm even here. You may have noticed at Duncan Aviation, we've been doing several webinars in the past about avionics systems. Well, today we're branching out. Obviously, we're talking about paint. And for the rest of the year, I think we're going to be doing, I'm looking at Eric here, we're going to be doing, I think, 2 webinars a month. Some are going to be on avionics and going to be non-avionics, but it's going to be, for the most part, everything to do with corporate aircraft and things to make it easier to manage your aircraft. So jumping in, what we're going to be talking about here is really the process of painting an airplane, and it's going to be much more detailed than that. And of course, you can see all the different things it takes to paint an airplane, every step there, but it's much more detailed than that. And I learned a lot because, well, basically I'm an avionics guy and I don't know a whole lot about paint. And working with these two, it's interesting to note how much of a maintenance event paint really is. Obviously, it's an aesthetics event. I mean, it's beautiful art, makes your airplane look great, but it's really, there's 2 sides of the story there, and we're going to dive into that a lot on this. We're going to be mindful of your time. We know you can't hang out here all day, though I know these two literally have been talking about paint all day. So we're not going to do that. So if you're looking to do a paint job, one of the first things you're going to do is you're going to call in and you're going to talk to Angie.
Yeah, so basically your sales team is going to be your front line that's going to take that phone call when somebody is interested in paint. So one of the biggest things with getting a paint quote is making sure that we know exactly what we're quoting. We can put out a lot of numbers for your standard base with a couple stripe colors, but really to get you a good price, we want to know exactly what scheme you're interested in and what colors and all of that. So we're going to get a designer involved if you don't already know what scheme you're looking for, and then they put together this rendering for you. And
so, I mean, I would have a clue how this happens. How many people, when they call in, know what they want? I mean, hey, this is exactly what I want, this, or?
Probably less than half.
Okay. So less than half have an idea of what they want, and then you've got to guide them through that process.
Right. So we have our designers here, and our design fees are all part of the process too. So our designers are part of the process, I should say. And so they'll start putting out schemes for you, give you an idea of what you're looking for, and they send this rendering. There's going to be colors on this rendering, and really we want to make sure that one, the scheme is what you're looking for, and also the colors.
So that's, you hit on that a few times before this, is getting the accurate color, and I think Brandy, you were saying not the print. I mean, an inkjet printer is maybe not the most accurate of what you're getting.
Right. Every printer prints a little bit differently, and every monitor casts the color out a little bit differently also.
So Angie, I mean, what do they do? What do they ask for from you or the designer?
So before we move forward and ordering paint, and we want to make sure we know exactly what colors you want. And to really do that, we're going to want you to look at a paint chip or maybe even a spray out to get an exact idea of what's going to be going on the airplane.
Okay, so they'll get a small panel of exactly the paint of what it looks like.
It's going to be close. There's always variances within colors, but yes, it should be very, very close.
Okay, makes sense.
Exact is a hard word to use.
Yeah, true. Very point. One thing I did forget to mention is you guys see the chat window there. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. If you see a slide and you're not sure what's going on, or you want us to clarify something, we're going to hit the questions more at the end. So we'll get to those, but feel free to bring up questions the whole way.
And then if we can back up really quick, Michael,
Yeah.
One of the big things that Duncan is making sure that we stick to the duration of the event that we told you. And one of the biggest things to be able to do that is to make sure that we have your paint colors and your scheme approved before we even get into the paint process.
Correct.
Okay, and that makes sense. And that leads perfectly into this is the incoming evaluation. And so you've got everything figured out. The airplane's coming in, and at Duncan, the downtimes are some of the shortest in the industry.
Yes.
Um,
And I think it's because of this phase of the paint job, correct?
This is a lot of it. There's a lot of pre-planning that goes into these projects. We know in the paint shop, we have a day-to-day flow of what we're going to do. And before your airplane ever arrives, we've got a pretty good schedule of exactly what we're going to do every day to that airplane to make sure we maintain that schedule.
Okay. Because you don't have time to get any clarification.
Very true.
Yeah. So once you get going.
Yep. We want to have everything in hand and ready to go.
And it's interesting. I remember years ago, like when we were painting, I mean, I think we've done some paint jobs. I mean, you were assigned so many hours, like, 242 hours of like calendar time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was amazing. Like you paint guys could like narrow down the process to that finite. It's quite amazing. So we've got everything figured out. We know what we're going to do. And then at that point, we go into getting the old paint off. The strip process. So obviously here the blue that's just the paint stripper.
Yep.
eating away.
Yep. That's a peroxide based stripper.
Okay. And it looks like we've got some stuff taped off. You've got tinfoil or whatever on the engines.
Correct.
And it's the paint stripper basically just eats plastic, correct?
To a certain degree, yeah. What it's doing is it's working its way down to the base layer, and then it's actually going to remove the paint from that direction up.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
So what you want to do here is the aluminum foil and tape you see over that engine, there's actually quite a bit underneath there. All the windows are protected. Any of the seams are protected that we don't want the sealer to come out of. Anything that's going to be a composite, either a Kevlar or carbon fiber composites, we want to protect all those because the stripper will eat into the resins of those. And once those resins start to you'll start having delamination of the plies of the composite.
Now back in the old days, and of course I remember one time when we were building a paint hanger, it was such a fight between the EPA, OSHA, the FAA. I mean,
yep.
and
that's changed.
Well, I know what's funny is I'd heard one time, if you're building a paint hanger, you're going to break somebody's rule because they all somewhat conflict because of all these chemicals.
There is a lot of rules that go behind it. One of the things that is very impressive here is all the water that we utilize in the paint department. We have two separate paint department buildings. Both those have waste treatment centers in them. So all the water that we're going to rinse all this stripper down with, and as we go forward, we'll see the acid wash and iodine. All that water gets trapped and then gets treated, and then all the bad chemical gets removed. And the only thing that we let off into the city, if we let anything off, is perfectly clean water.
Pure water. That's probably not a cheap process
to
do that. Because back in the day, I mean, not probably that long ago, the stripper was an acid.
Correct.
And it was a quick process.
It was quick. It's quick and it's harmful, both to people and everything around it. And it's not great on the airplane either.
Really?
Right.
It was pretty hard on.
It's tougher on the, airplanes, rivets and skins are dissimilar. Acid it eats into things. You know what I mean? It's an acid. So over the years, and the EPA's had a lot to do with that too, to try and lessen the impact on the environment. So
Right.
the peroxide is kind of the go-to for everybody right now.
I do recall many years ago, after the airplane was rinsed, it was perfectly clean. It was in a hangar, and I put my hand on the wing just talking to somebody, and there was just a tiny little residue, and it started burning right through.
The overspray of it in the old hangars, the old crossdraft, as that stripper would blow across the air, it would feel like needles hitting them.
Oh my gosh, amazing. So, but this is obviously a very important step, because really this is where it gets into the maintenance discussion of the aircraft, because after you strip it, this is really where you're inspecting the aircraft and you're looking for the corrosion at this point. And I think this is an image of a TR bucket, correct?
Correct.
And all those little black dots, that's all corrosion.
Yep.
So, that seems like a lot of corrosion there.
That was it was a bad
Okay.
one. So, and that's why we use the image to,
Right.
It's very easy to pick it out of there. So,
okay. So you're looking over the whole airplane, you start seeing this. What's your next step?
So what we're going to want to do here is evaluate how deep the corrosion is into the surface. Most of the time, the corrosion's actually just kind of on top of the surface. So when we abrade the surface to metal sand, that's all going to come off.
Okay.
And then the acid wash and the iodine are going to go ahead and treat that and take care of it. After we run over that with a sander, if it doesn't remove it easily, what we're going to go to is contact our airframe department, and they're going to come down, and usually they start off with a media blast.
Okay.
And if that won't take care of it, then we go to basically grinding, and then that's where they end up having to remove, small amounts of the actual aluminum. And once you start to remove aluminum, then you have to get engineering involved and go through your maintenance man.
So it's got to be, I think one of the advantages there of Duncan is having those mechanics and the engineers.
Absolutely.
And the processes down.
Yep.
So if you do stumble across it. Now this kind of hit me. You're back a few slides ago, we were talking about the incoming inspection. Obviously, if you hit corrosion, you're ready to strip the airplane and get on to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
You stumble on corrosion.
Mm-hmm.
Now obviously this is throwing a wrench into the system.
It very well can. And that you kind of touched on it. That's the beauty of having a full-blown FBO here.
Okay.
Our airframe department and several departments up there, most of Duncan runs 3 shifts. So we have 2 more shifts after us to try and take care of some of these areas.
Okay.
And through a lot of years of planning, and we can make adjustments. And
is this something, if you're doing the incoming inspection, and the airplane hasn't been painted in a while, it seems like if you're going to have corrosion under the paint, is that something you're kind of looking for on that incoming inspection? Or are you peeking around looking for bubbling and cracking? Or
when it comes to a paint job, we don't technically do an incoming inspection.
Okay.
We do more of an evaluation.
Okay.
So what we do is just kind of look over the airplane, look for damaged areas, things like that.
Okay, makes sense.
Issues that are going to pose what we would think is a safety concern.
Right.
Things like that.
Makes sense. So my question is, this was a painted surface, it had primer and paint on it. And for a guy like me, I would have thought that would have protected the surface from this even happening.
Mm-hmm.
So how did this happen? How do you get corrosion under the paint?
There's a lot of different ways that could happen. It's kind of hard to say. There are a lot of possibilities that the metal is already impregnated with the corrosion.
Okay.
In this instance here, it's been several years. I don't quite remember what we had. But if this was a previously refurbished paint job, if it wasn't treated correctly underneath that paint, without that treatment under the paint does you no good.
Okay.
In age, as the paint ages, the paint is going to become more porous. As it becomes more porous, you're going to let more through.
Understood.
So even with a full coating of paint is still porous.
Gotcha.
So
that makes sense that so Angie, you got someone that's got a 20-year paint jobs coming in,
Yeah.
it seems like the odds of them having corrosion are going to be a little higher.
I would say if you've waited 20 years to paint your airplane, you probably better plan on having some corrosion underneath that paint.
Really? So what operator, I mean, what would you say is a good time? I mean, no matter how it's funny. How often do you repaint an airplane no matter how good it looks? Because it's really about the metal underneath.
Right. Again, we say that paint is maintenance, and we want to be able to get underneath that paint to look at what's going on underneath there. Really, we're going to recommend that you do that anywhere from 7 to 8 years. It'd be nice to get it longer, but that's kind of where we're at, just to make sure, corrosion doesn't get better over time. You want to catch it as early as possible.
Okay. So even if it's a beautiful looking paint job and you maintain it perfectly, it's still worth getting back down there and making sure everything's good.
A new paint job, while it's not cheap, corrosion removal is much more costly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And obviously value of the aircraft.
Absolutely.
I mean, if it gets into the logbooks, all that. And since we're talking about corrosion and maintenance of the airplane, I know a lot of concerns are the gear wells. It's a area that gets a lot of wear and tear, a lot of water, a lot of moisture. I mean, it would make sense to strip and paint gear wells, wouldn't it?
Yes and no. The problem with that is there's really no good way to strip a gear well. If you've ever looked up in a gear well, it's full of lines and hoses and all kind of actuators, things like that. So to get in there and actually try to chemically strip is going to be next to impossible. The better thing that we've found lately is what we're pushing more towards, and the OEMs are kind of on the same track as we are, is during either a maintenance event or even a paint event, is to bring your aircraft in and have the gear wells steam cleaned, and or what we're looking into now is dry ice blasting. The dry ice blasting it's an amazing feature. It removes dirt, oil, grease. It removes the old corrosion inhibiting compounds and leaves you, and it doesn't affect either the paint or the primer that is from the factory OEM. It gives you a nice clean surface that your airframe department can inspect for corrosion then, and if there is something, obviously take care of it. But after that, you go back in there. Your best thing is to apply a new coating of green primer, where it's missing the corrosion primer and any missing surfaces, and then come back with a corrosion inhibiting compound like we talked about. Here there's a couple of different ones. We have Dinitrol and we also have Corban.
Sounds good. So that's probably the better way to do it.
It's a much better way. The nice thing about that is that stuff is fairly easily removable. Just like we talked with the ice blaster, you come back in, you can remove that, re-inspect the gear, put it right back in.
Gotcha.
Whereas if I cover up something with paint is going to be hard to remove again.
Right. And for you to get that paint to stick, you're either going to, you'd have to mostly scuff it, wouldn't you?
Yep. So there's only two ways really for paint to adhere. It's either through a chemical adhesion or an abrasion. So an abrasion would be scuffing. It's just like we talked. There's so much stuff up in the gear and up in your way,
right,
that scuffing it is next to impossible. So really what you're going to do is scuff it as best you possibly can. And then you're going to go in there, you're going to paint over that. And everywhere that you didn't get that paint scuffed, over time is going to start falling back off.
Oh God.
It's just not going to adhere, and you're going to really end up with a bigger mess than you started up.
So that really it's a good lead into this next image of the etch and anodyne. You said there's really two ways for paint to really prep a surface. One is scuff, another is the chemical process. So obviously this is what you would recommend for everyone, correct?
Absolutely.
And so what's going on with an etch and anodyne?
So with an etch and anodyne, with this image here, you're seeing the airplane. It's actually just been rinsed for strip. So what we're going to do now is open everything up, remask everything that we need to, and we're going to come back and we're going to sand over all the areas that have been covered around the windows, the engines, the composites, any of the lap seams or butted seams that we've covered. We're going to remove all that paint and clean everything up, buzz over any of the open metal where the stripper didn't remove everything. And then we're going to come back, blow the airplane off, clean it up, and we're going to come back with what's an acid wash. The acid wash is basically a cleaner. It's a cleaner / brightener. What that's going to do is basically clean that metal. It's going to get the oily handprints, residues, things like that off the airplane. And then we're going to come back with the iodine. The iodine is by far, in our opinion, it's the most important part. You're going to come in, it's going to give it's what gives you that goldish hued tint to the airplane. And what that's going to do is, one, it helps to slow down if there is any existing corrosion anywhere, due to dissimilar metals between rivets and skins, things like that. The iodine is going to soak over those areas and should help to inert that process. Nothing's going to ever stop that process, but we think it's going to at least give you a best shot to slow that down. The second thing that iodine is going to do is, if you could look at it under a microscope, it's going to give you what look like almost little fingers coming off that. And that's going to give you that etch for your corrosion primer to stick to.
And then it jumps in there. So, Angie, I don't know how often it happens. I mean, I know there is a paint process of just scuffing it and just painting over it. Do you have people ask for that?
Yeah, and we can do that, and we will do that. But part of that whole process is that we don't warranty the paint job then. Reason being is because it's difficult to warranty that type of partial paint when you don't see what's underneath there. And again, paint is maintenance. We want to make sure that we're getting all that potential corrosion taken care of.
So it makes sense. I mean, if you don't know what the corrosion is under there and you're just painting on top of it,
right?
It's obviously just feeds on itself. So we've done that. We're going to go first. We're going to prime the aircraft, but there's different types of prime. The first coat is a special coat, isn't it?
Yep. So the first coat we're going to put down is going to be the corrosion primer. That's going to be your next level of protection against it. And you're going to get a full coat over the whole aircraft. And then after that sets, you're going to go to what we here use an epoxy primer surfacer. We call it a filler primer. That's where the maintenance portion kind of slows down, and this is where the beauty part of it starts coming into play. So we're going to put 3 coats of this filler primer down, and this is how we're going to get that smooth finish when it's all said and done. So you don't have the rivet rings and things like that. You get that bullet surface that we're known for.
Nice. And then you're going to go with the top coat. So this is the not the final part, but actually the first of the base, or not base coat, the top coat. So on a normal white airplane, obviously you guys can see this is blue. On a white airplane, how many coats do you put on?
We use a 2-coat system.
This is obviously not white. What do you do here?
So what we got going here is actually a base clear system. It's going to be similar to what's on your vehicle at home, just much more durable. With a base clear system, there's pluses and minuses to single stage systems and base coat clear coat systems. We found that with a white overall base, we prefer the single stage system. We find that works out best for us and for maintenance down the road. When it comes to doing colors on aircraft, we go with the base clear system. So with a base clear like this, we're going to go with usually 2 to 3 coats of base. And then after that is tacked up, we're going to go 2 to 3 coats of clear coat over the top of that.
Interesting. So you get that all on there. You got the pretty colors. Now it's going into the striping process. Now, with the first slide, we had the rendering.
Correct.
So how do we go from a rendering to getting that actually onto an airplane?
So when that rendering gets approved, it's going to go to our paint shop layout team then, who's going to lay out those stripes on that aircraft with masking tape using landmarks that they identify through the rendering to get it exactly where that end owner wants that stripe to lay.
So gift wrapping an airplane like this, as it is, appears to be extremely time consuming.
It is.
So, I mean, I've seen so many different paint jobs. Like this airplane, it doesn't look too complex. It looks great, but striping seems like this would be a fairly easy airplane to stripe.
It's simpler.
Okay.
They all pose their challenges.
Right.
When you're looking at something like this, it's a G5, the height, that's
true.
And then the stripes are actually on the top of the airplane versus on the bottom. So there's nothing you could do on this aircraft without either some sort of a scissor lift or off ladders.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Then you have this. So this looks like a paint striping challenge, to say it mildly.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take to do this?
It's been a while, but I think we were somewhere around 2 weeks between layout and painting on that.
My gosh. And
just for the stripe process, not including the base white.
are those stripes different colors?
Yes. Yeah, they have a layered effect, and that's what kind of gives it that transition.
And so then we've got, so this aircraft has a lot of colors.
Yes, so that aircraft there has 23 different colors painted on the exterior.
And so, it seems like adding color, I mean, most people would like to add more colors. It's artwork, so more colors the better. So that's usually not a big deal to do that, correct?
No, every time you add a color, that aircraft has to be remasked because every color is shot separately.
Oh my gosh.
So that's why when we say, our standard paint pricing is standard base with 2 stripe colors, any additional color that you add is an additional charge because the added labor to remask that airplane for every color.
And so say you've got this scheme that you want to do and it's getting time to do the layout process. Can a customer come in and say, I want to watch you do this or something to that effect?
Yeah, we always invite our customers to come out and look at the layout. Again, we can do it by photos, but they're always welcome to our facility to actually look at the layout before we shoot it.
Good. And then this one, I like this. I like this paint job. Now that's not a metallic, correct?
Correct. That is actually Corrosion.
And so, as far as, I mean, I want to guess that's an expensive paint.
That was a very expensive paint, Michael. Very expensive.
But it's cool. As far as painting it on your part, Brandon, is it difficult to paint a Corrosion?
It's not necessarily more or less difficult. It just has more steps to the process. So everywhere you see that green had to be base coated with a black because that green is essentially see-through.
Okay.
So you have to have a black background underneath of it to get the effect to work correctly.
Now, another popular thing on any type of paint job, cars, boats, is metallics because it looks so cool.
Yep.
Now, I can see why a lot of airplanes would want that. That's not a big deal to put the metallic on there, is there?
It's not necessarily a big deal to put it on the airplane. What you're going to run into more than anything is down the road issues. Airplanes go through a lot of maintenance in their life. A lot of panels come on, panels come off. They ensue damage, not necessarily damage, but they wear. An airplane goes from 107 degrees sitting on a ramp up to 5 below when it's in flight. They go through a lot of stretching and bouncing, and rivets move, and seams start to crack, things like that. So to maintain your airplane, you want to make sure that you're touching these areas up, or after you go through a maintenance event, screws and or seams that had to be broken open and sealer removed and put back in, that all needs to be touched back up afterwards.
Okay.
The biggest downfall of a metallic and or a pearl is that they don't brush touch well. They can be very difficult to spot back in.
Just because the metallic flakes don't?
Correct.
Okay.
To get them to drop the same direction and over from time to time.
I will add too that the metallic, if you wanted to go in the route of a metallic base, pearl base, or even the Corrosion base, they are more expensive,
right,
than your Matterhorn white or your Snow Whites.
Yep.
Is that 5% more expensive, or is that 30% more expensive?
Again, it's going to depend on the size of the airplane, where exactly you want to put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our design on that, our design team does a very good job of, taking, like we've seen the G5 earlier, a very maintenance friendly aircraft, right? It's all white. It's got the pearl top on it. Those are in areas that there's not going to be a lot of maintenance happening.
Okay.
They didn't run those metallic colors through a lot of access panels and things like that.
That's smart.
So what's going to happen is that plane, you know, he got a lot of pizzazz and he got a lot of wow factor in it, but yet it's going to maintain a lot of maintenance friendly capabilities down the road.
Yeah. Cool. So as the paint job's done, I think this is, again, we really don't know how other people paint aircraft, but I know on the post paint maintenance, we do a lot there with it, because I mean, you've got flight controls came off.
Yep.
And they're going to be rebalanced.
Yep.
Per maintenance manual, or
correct. On most aircraft, the flight controls are all removed. They will be rebalanced per the maintenance manual and then reinstalled per the maintenance manual.
Okay. And gear swings.
Yep.
You do full gear swings on every airplane.
Correct. Because on most every complete painting your landing gear in place is included in that.
Okay.
So what that means is we're going to clean up, we're going to wash that gear, we're going to wipe it all down. Well, when we do that, obviously we're trying to get as much of the grease and grime and things like that out of there. Well, and we're going to mask and tape and cover everything that we don't want to get painted on there.
Right.
So we're going to come back, remove all that. And then just for, you know, one, we're going to re-lube all that gear to put back everything we've taken out.
Okay.
And then we want to swing those gear just to make sure that there is no issue afterwards, because obviously you don't just pull over.
Right.
When
Yeah.
there's an issue. So.
Understood. And that really kind of goes into the post paint maintenance. Is you're going to talk long term also, Angie. I mean, and that was a thing I'd never even considered is maintaining your paint job.
Right. Right. So your paint job, as good as our teams do here, the best way to maintain that paint is to make sure that you're taking care of it, that you're wiping it down after every flight, that if you're in an area where there might be high salt in the area, that you're, again, wiping that down, getting that off of there, and then hangering it, making sure that it's hangered, keep it out of the elements as much as possible.
And so
and then the touch up, I think Brandon talked about that a little bit. Over time, you may get some areas where that paint starts to chip off or flake off. If you start seeing, some bare metals, making sure that gets touched up right away to protect that area.
We do have a lot of questions coming in, and actually this is going to tie in. Andrew had a question about kind of a wax or a protective coating. And it's not standard, but it is an option, isn't it?
Right. So another option to help maintain your new paint is PermaGuard. And basically what PermaGuard is it's a reactive polymer filler. And what that does is it's going to bond to the paint. It's going to seal and lock in that paint finish. And that really just, again, helps maintain that final finish of your new paint job.
And you were saying, I mean, I think you were talking about the natural thing is like when you smash into bugs and you clean, scrub that off.
Right.
If it's on that paint surface, you're doing damage.
You're scratching your paint.
Okay.
Every time you wipe down an airplane, they're micro scratches, but you're putting small scratches into your paint.
Okay.
An easy way to see them is you look at the hood of your car and it looks like it has kind of a swirled effect to it. Those swirls are actually just micro scratches from rags or whatnot.
And so this product eliminates that, correct?
It protects
for the most part.
from that.
Yeah. It's gonna. So what you're gonna do is, So what
I wouldn't say
you're
eliminate.
When you're
helps protect it.
Right, when you're wiping that, you're actually wiping that PermaGuard surface
instead of the paint.
Correct. Since it's bonded to the paint, you're gonna actually put those micro scratches into that surface.
So then, again, with the PermaGuard, you've got your initial application of the PermaGuard, but to get your best effect out of the PermaGuard is making sure that you keep up with those annual treatments.
Oh, that's true, because it's not permanent. You've got to.
It's just like anything else; it's going to wear over time.
It wears down.
Okay, so you do that every year.
Yep.
And like right as we were talking about this, Carlos mentioned a product called Pro Ceramic.
I will admit I am not familiar with the Pro Ceramic. That would be something we would need to look into.
Okay, Carlos will get into that or look into it.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of different protections out there.
Okay, and I guess I'm surprised we let it go this far about PermaGuard without stressing it's not wax.
Correct.
It is not wax.
If there's one thing to take away on PermaGuard.
We got a lot of questions coming in. We're going to get to those here real quick. Some of the key takeaways. And I know both of you guys had some things that you really wanted people to know about the incoming inspection. I think both of you drove home hard on that make sure whenever you're doing a paint job, do this inspection, kind of the evaluation.
Making sure that you've got a clear expectation and that our teams know exactly what they're doing when they take that aircraft down to the paint shop. We really don't want to leave any questions for them to put a hiccup in the process. So doing that walk around and having that clear expectation of what you're going to get when they're done.
We want to get your clear expectation of what you're expecting, and we want to give you ours. We don't want to, there's a few things that we've talked about a little bit of the maintenance friendly. There's certain things that we do different to aircraft that we've learned over the last 30 years. We our benefit to us is that a lot of aircraft come through here. So we're able to look at airplanes, even ones that aren't coming in for paint, what's holding up, what's not holding up, what seams are cracking, what seams are pushing the sealer out of them. And so we've, over the years, try to watch these areas, and paint is it's paint. It's not a cure-all for anything, but anything that we can try to do to mitigate issue going forward. A lot of what we do these days is put sealer in after the paint job. That way, years ago the sealer was put in, you primed over it, and you made it as smooth and almost as unnoticeable as possible. Well, the problem with that is the second that panel needs to come off, now I'm going to break away that sealer, the paint, the primer, everything underneath, and I'm going to have a bigger eyesore. Now, what we would do is we want to put that sealer in afterwards, especially on a panel that's going to get pulled off quite often. That way, you're going to get your paint job. You're going to leave here. It's going to be beautiful. You're going to go to your first maintenance event. They're going to put those panels back on, put that sealer back in, touch it up just like we did, and your aircraft's still going to maintain that beauty.
And I completely forgot about this. We were talking about all the way back on the when it was stripped down, looking at the corrosion. That's where you took the panels off. So for people that you sometimes quote panels, you can leave the inspection panels on, paint the airplane, paint all over on top of it, but we can also take them off.
Right. So one of the things that we're recommending more and more, especially with these two aircraft that you see here, you've got some art going on those airplanes, painting those maintenance panels separate from the rest of the paint job and doing new hardware is going to help with that ease of maintenance. And that's really something that we've been talking about with our customers more.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you're going with the seams and everything. With
exactly. Yeah, it all plays a hand in hand.
And it's interesting because now, I didn't think strongly either way, but just when you talk about the corrosion, anyway, if you don't paint those separately, and the first time you break that off, you're breaking that seal. I mean, there's moisture's getting to the metal.
That metal should be reprotected. After it's just. You're going to have to do it through either touch-up or spot-ins.
Yeah, just doesn't look as good.
Nope.
So then the other big one, Angie, you were talking about is confirming paint color, is really getting a good idea.
Right. Again, the paint rendering that you get from a designer is really just to give you an idea of what the scheme is going to look like. To look at the paint color, you really need to have a paint chip or a spray out. And the difference between a paint chip and a spray out is a paint chip from a paint vendor, it could just be on a piece of aluminum. A spray out is going to be a bigger piece of aluminum that's going to show you. But that's really what you want to use to approve your paint color.
Okay. And then Brandon, you really stressed before the paint as maintenance. I mean, it's a big two-part process.
It's a big two-part process. Yeah. It's absolutely a maintenance event. It's an aircraft is an expensive thing. The skin of the aircraft is about the largest. It's just like the skin of your body. You have to maintain the skin on your body. It's no different with an airplane.
Makes sense. And so a lot of that really is just, once you get it up to the strip process and prep, the corrosion prep. Really, once you put that first layer of primer, that corrosion primer, at that point, then you're kind of going more on the aesthetics, how good that sanding looks.
Right. That's where, a paint job is only as good as its prep.
And that's the key to you really is the prep.
Absolutely. Yeah. A good shiny overall paint is nothing but a magnifying glass. You know, if you leave a bad edge here or there, paint doesn't generally hide that edge. It kind of magnifies that.
And
edge.
really, so what you're saying is if you have any problems with paint down the road, it usually had something to do with the prep.
Usually.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, they're aircraft, you know,
Yeah.
they go through a lot of,
That's true.
they go through a lot of wear and tear up in the air.
Understood.
So
Again, we want to be mindful of your time. We've got a lot of questions coming in. We'll get to the questions first. Angie's the go-to. If you need to get anything on paint, I know some of you have got some questions here. People want to see some more examples of pictures, so on and so forth. Angie can help you with that on what you're looking for. We're going to leave this slide up so you can get her contact information. And we're going to jump into some of the questions that we have. We probably won't have time to get to them all, but we will try. And then Brandon, I think you're going to run with some of these.
yeah, I got a few of them on there. Here.
Yeah, we got to scroll. Hang on.
Down here. So Andrew had a great question on the wet on wet or wet on dry for the second color coat of paint. What we do is a wet on wet. We do obviously dry, you know, the filler primer, and then that process is sanded. So that would be dry. But then for the top coat and the white is always a wet on wet situation. And then for the base coat, clear coat, we also go with wet on wet.
Okay. What else you got?
Andrew also had the question of waxing to help
Yep.
extend the paint life. I think Angie kind of went over that with the PermaGuard. So yes, that is absolutely a good help.
The layers, Kyle?
Oh, okay. So yeah, Kyle's got how much weight are the 4 to 6 layers of color and top coat adding versus the 2 layers of white? You know, there's it's a
double. Just kidding.
No.
Simple math would make sense,
right.
but maybe not.
On
Sorry.
paper, that's
Had to go there.
You think that's right. The difference is the white, the film build of the white is actually going to be a little bit thicker than the film build that you're going to have with the base coat color.
Oh, I got you.
So the base coat, and that's why you put the clear coat over the base coat color, because it's missing the resins and the protection, the UV protection. So that's where the clear coat comes in over that. So
Makes sense.
there's going to be a small weight addition, but it's going to be a negligible weight addition.
And I don't know if we can answer this one from Carlos. It's a good question. You know, he's got really driving home the quality and corrosion issues, kind of a difference in price. And mostly, I don't know if you can do kind of a percent wise, doing a full paint versus a partial. So a scuff and paint. I mean, so he's going to lose warranty with that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a 20% cheaper? I mean, I don't know how often you actually paint those or coat those.
You know, you're probably going to be looking at maybe right around that halfway mark.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, we would actually want to see your airplane to be able to give you a good price for a scuff and paint.
Great.
Make sure it's a reasonable candidate.
Yep.
Grant's got an awesome question here. Increased use of composites on the airframes now. Do you see an increase or decrease or no change of the average paint life base compared to using aluminum? And you're right. These things
That is a great question. You know, both composites and aluminum really offer up a lot of their own challenges. The aluminum skins are obviously held together through rivets. And then with the flex, the rivets over time, you know, start to loosen and you get rivet rash or rivet popping.
right.
So that's a pretty, you know, thing we deal with on those. When it comes to composites, depending the composites, what we're fighting with those is there's no great way to, once composites start to age, they seem to almost to, in a sense, dry out.
Okay.
They shrink, and as they shrink, they start to crack. So when your composite itself starts getting hairline cracks inside of it, no matter what surfacer you put over the top of that surfacer is going to either show those cracks underneath or start cracking with that composite.
Gotcha.
Mm.
The only way through that is basically you have all your composites removed and remeshed or reworked.
Yeah.
Which is, it's really not a possible thing.
Yeah. we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions here. We'll try to. Oh, I'm getting told. Hang on. Oh, good question. Where does Duncan paint their aircraft? Angie?
So we actually have paint booths in 3 facilities now for Duncan Aviation. We are in Battle Creek, Michigan, Lincoln, Nebraska, and Provo, Utah. And Brandon can speak to a little bit more about how those booths work with the cross draft and the other one, downdraft. Yep.
So we have a combination of both. The downdraft paint. The downdraft is generally just a paint booth. We try to do limited amounts of sanding in there. We don't really prime in there. We try to reserve that just for painting. And then our cross draft booths, we have here in Lincoln, we have a cross draft booth that we treat just pretty much like our downdraft booth. We do as limited sanding in there as possible. And we also, try not to, we don't do any priming or stripping or anything in there also. So,
yeah. Again, thank you for all these questions are really good questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of you, but keep them coming in because we're going to get a hold of you guys individually. One of the good questions obviously is cost. And I know, like, what does a paint job cost? And obviously it's a huge variance between size of airplane, metallics, all that kind of stuff. But what's your rough answer?
Yeah. So once you call and start looking at doing a paint job with us, again, to have an idea of what kind of paint scheme you're looking for is always helpful. But we'll also give out ROMs just on a standard base with a couple stripe colors. And right now for a small medium, again, depending on the model, you'd be looking around maybe 100,000. Michael, and then for the large aircraft, those really vary, from a Falcon 2000 all the way to a Global. So that range can vary quite a bit. You can go from 150,000 to beyond 300.
Yeah. Okay. Again, we didn't get to all the questions. We will reach out to each of you individually. And again, we're going to leave this webinar up and running for a little while. So if you think of anything, also you've got Angie's contact information. And as these two are discussing at 3:00 in the morning, when you wake up and you're like, I wish I would have asked her this, send her an email. She's probably up because she's just been having so much fun talking about webinar paint. But again, Angie, thank you so much for helping me understand all this and everyone tuning in, giving us a little insight on how paint jobs are actually done. And Brandon, thanks for tuning in. I know it probably you're worrying about what all the guys are doing to an airplane. You need to get to that airplane, but you spent 19 years, honestly, probably one of the harder, dirtiest jobs dealing with terrible chemicals over the time. And it's interesting, like not a lot of people do your job in that type of condition and do art at the same time.
No, it's you got to love this job to stay doing it. It's definitely a labor of love.
Good. So on behalf of everyone here at Duncan Aviation, we're so glad you chose us. We're looking forward to taking care of your aircraft. From Angie, Brandon, and Eric, who's running everything behind the scenes here. We thank you all and have a great day.